welcome back to the podcast. It's Sarah, and today I have a really fun interview because this is one of Talon's longtime friends. Andy is here to talk about his experience with a lot of different things, but particularly what I'm really interested in is he is doing work with peer support, kind of connected with the state. So Andy, you'll tell us a lot about that, but introduce yourself. Who are you? Why are you here? What's kind of your what's your journey been? And then are you using he, him pronouns or they, them?
Both. Yeah. Good.
Okay.
Thank you for he, him, or they, them.
Awesome. Okay, Andy, tell us what is up? Why are you here?
Yeah. Hello. So my name is Andy Levitt. I use he, him, or they, them pronouns. Yeah, so I live with bipolar disorder. I have been working in the peer world since 2019, and working in the peer field really helped. So initially, I was a youth peer on a WISE team, which WISE stands for Wraparound with Intensive Services. So the youth that I work with at that time were ages 14 to 24. The youth that were in specifically WISE were ages 13 to 21. And for those youth, they were folks that had really intensive behavioral health challenges. Some of them had been in inpatient long-term care for a while before coming into our wraparound team. And so the youth that I work with were, really struggling. And I did that job for 3.5 years, and I absolutely loved it. It was I got to be the person that I needed when I was 17. It's working as a peer. What that means is that you used your lived experience to support the people that you're working with. And so I got to share experiences of, finding stability from psychosis, because the type of bipolar that I have is bipolar 1, and that includes psychosis. And so I got to really share the parts of my story that were relevant. You don't want to share all of them because youth don't need to know everything, every bit of it. But, my favorite stories that I like to tell in leaving that job, because I was very intentional about leaving that job. I did it for 3.5 years. And if I could have gotten paid a living wage, I would have stayed in that job indefinitely. But because I needed to make more money to support my family, I got into my current role. But before I left that last job, I was very intentional. I got approval to purchase cards for each person that I was working with. I had a caseload of about 25 when I left. And so I got a card that I wrote a handwritten note in each one of those cards, and included some stickers that reminded me of that particular person. And I gave each person that I worked with their cards on our last session. And one person in particular was, this is someone that I was really concerned about my leaving, because I was a wraparound team consists of a youth peer, a family peer, who is the person that works with the parents as the person with lived experience, a clinician, and a care coordinator. And that care coordinator is the one who facilitates all of the wraparound meetings and things like that. And with one person that I was working with, I was really the only person that they were comfortable working with or opening up to in any way. And so I was really concerned in leaving how this person would do. And so I got approval to buy them an extra gift that was really reflective of the things that they care about. And I'm being really intentional about not including specific details because I don't want to break their health information. But that was really, really good. And this person told me that at the end of our last session, they told me that it was because I shared my experience of overcoming and finding stability with my psychosis, that they felt like as a teenager, that they had hope for the future, that they felt like it wasn't just going to be total chaos for the rest of their life, that they felt like because I did it, I was able to find stability. Well, they can too. And that's the whole point of peer support, is to early on when I was first trained as a peer counselor, because you go through a certification process, they teach you, at least the training that I got was that as a peer, you are an ambassador of hope. And I really align with that. And especially full transparency, right now, I'm in a pretty depressed state, and I'm comfortable with that. I've done so much work with my mental health that I can be very functional and show up while in a deep depression. But even with that, I was the other night, I was like, how do I get out of this? And I was like, you know what? I am an amazing peer counselor for other people. What if I turn that on myself? What if I talk to myself in the way that, I talk to the youth that I serve? What about, and even though I'm no longer in that role as a youth peer, I do volunteer as a recovery coach on the weekends. Right now I'm only working with one person, but basically what that looks like is just phone calls once a week to check in, see how they're doing. With people, sometimes peer services can be more accessible than therapy. Often they're free. There's no charge or low cost. And so that's what I'm doing as the recovery coach. Is I'm trying to get that like direct service aspect, because in my current role, I don't get to really work with a lot of people directly. And that is really what like makes my heart sing, is being able to connect. Yeah, that's a little bit about what brought me to, and then this, you asked about why am I here? I'm here primarily because I've known Talon since we were 13 years old. And, you asked me to do this, and I'm, more than willing. I love sharing my story. I really, like I said, I want to be that ambassador of hope. I want people to know that it's possible, that, even when living with serious mental illness, like you can live a happy, healthy, successful life. And even though, yeah, there's things are going to be challenging, maybe more challenging than neurotypical people, it's still like, I am still grateful for the perspective that my mental illness provides me, and the empathy that I'm able to have for folks that I encounter in the world. So I think that answers all your questions, but feel free to pepper me with more.
I love it. I love it. So I think it's so sweet that you've known Talon for so long. By the way, I tried to hit on Talon when I was 18 and he had no idea. So that's funny. He did not even remember me, and that's cute too. But growing up, I mean, I never had the language for borderline, right? I had the language for like depressed and anxious and OCD and all of these things in childhood that, I was diagnosed with. But your experience with bipolar, and particularly bipolar 1, which most people don't experience their, first psychotic symptoms until late teens, early adulthood. What was your kind of experience like with headed towards diagnosis?
Yeah. Yeah. So I have struggled with like kind of intense moods, you would say, since I was very young. I got into therapy when I was 13, when my best friend at the time disclosed to my parents that I was self-harming. And a lot of that came from bullying, but also just like, you know, big moods big emotions I didn't know how to handle. So I got into therapy, and then, but I didn't, when you're 13, when you're a teenager, you don't really listen to your therapist. And that, again, why I love peer support, because I was able to connect with youth like in a way that was like we were peers versus like I'm this clinician high above versus like this young person telling you what to do. But going back to my story, so I was really struggling, and then so in 2006, 2007, everything felt like it was falling apart. My grandma died, and she was like my best friend at the time, growing up. She was also my connection to my Judaism, my Jewish heritage, and that was, a big part that just kind of got ripped away. I can't remember the specific details of everything because I was so out of my mind. I was a teenager, and I was trying to cope with it all, and I wasn't doing a good job. So I cried out for help. And I'm not going to give the details of that because it's too graphic, but I cried out for help. My parents worked really hard. My mom, I was really privileged that we had insurance the entire time that I was going through my mental health crises. And so they were able, through Kaiser, to get me into an inpatient youth rehab, essentially. And I went in specifically for self-harm. So the first day I was there, I was already on an antidepressant at the time. But when I got there, they doubled the antidepressants. And within a week, I was gone. I was psychotic. I thought that I was Jesus, Buddha, Allah. Like I was everyone.
Most people most people don't know that an antidepressant will make a person who's bipolar manic. Like they do not know that. And it's such a fucking weird thing. Like I don't understand the chemistry around all of that, but oh my God, there you are, living proof. That's what happened.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I have been psychotic a number of times in my life, but that first episode was so terrifying. It was good until it was not, like, I don't know if you've ever experienced mania. I think like that's a thing, but like, it was like, I was was Jesus Buddha and Allah. Everyone wanted to have sex with me. Like, and granted, I was 17 also at the time. So, I was like hitting on the counselors at the treatment facility and like trying to, and then it got really scary and I started seeing demons and ghosts and like having really scary visions, and it was really scary. And so eventually the staff were like, we can't handle this, you need to go to the hospital. So I went to the hospital after a week of being at the rehab center. Went to the hospital, was there for 2 weeks. I don't really remember a lot from my stay at the hospital because I was so out of my head. The only thing that I really remember is this was around the time the movie The Ring came out, and I have a very distinct memory, and I don't know if this was a hallucination or just someone else in the ward that looked like the person, but the girl from The Ring, I saw her sitting outside of my room crying, and I saw her like there the entire time that I was there. So I don't know. I don't know what that was, but I have that memory. And so then I went back to the rehab center after I stabilized, and they put me on some very, very heavy drugs. I don't know if am I allowed to say like what drugs? Okay. So they put me on Depakote, which is like when you give that to a 17-year-old, like it makes you gain weight like really quickly, and it like increases your appetite and reduces your metabolism. So at 17 years old, when I was already struggling with body health, like body image stuff, like at the time, and like gender stuff, which I didn't even have language for at the time, I gained like 70 pounds within the course of 6 months on this medication. And that was really rough. And so I went at the hospital for 2 weeks, then went to rehab for 4 weeks. Then they discharged me. And you will appreciate this. Talon and our two, am I allowed to say the other two people's friends? Okay. So Talon, Finch, and Jordan, they were the only people that really like showed up for me after I was in the like ward basically. And I don't know if I still have it, but they told me specifically to hold on to it forever. So I hope that I have it somewhere. But there's like a zine that I think it was just Finch and Jordan made, but I don't know if Talon was a part of it as well. But they made me like a very like hundreds of pages of zines, mostly of pictures of rats and pictures of like their pets. Um, but this was like, pre like smartphones. And so they had to like print things from the computer, and like, it was a whole thing, but they did that for me. And I cherished that. And so, coming out of that, I lost a lot of friends. I also, at the time, for leading up to that hospitalization, I had been in a relationship with a Catholic boy for 3.5 years, and that also had just ended. And because like up until that point, I was like, okay, I'm going to be a Catholic wife. I'm going to have 6 babies and it's going to be great. And I'm so glad that didn't work out.
Yeah. The 6 babies part it gives me fear for my own anatomy. I'm like, ooh, that ain't for me.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but yeah, so there was a lot of just like turmoil in my personal life leading to institutionalization, which led to over medication, which led to psychosis, which led to the diagnosis of bipolar 1.
Yeah, that was quite the journey. One of the things that I get stuck on often is like the general public does not realize just how, gosh, what is the word I'm thinking of? Archaic institutions are, even private, privately funded Providence Kaiser institutions, and the way in which they go hands-on with patients, and they will do intramuscular injections for psych meds without consent. And, there's the lifelong struggle, which I know as peer support, right? Of like health and safety versus like autonomy and what's the other word? What did we say at DDA? Health and safety versus shit. I forget the other value, specifically because we were always taught health and safety first. And it's very frustrating to me that not a lot of people understand the way in which institutionalization can be more traumatizing than it can be helpful. And you gave a really good, I don't know if anyone ever went hands-on with you, but you gave a really good example of like Depakote wasn't the right drug for you.
Yeah, yeah, and there were, I mean, like, I can't watch certain shows that depict when people are forced onto a gurney and strapped down. because that is exactly what happened to me multiple times. And it's scary. And, at the and they're like, at times it makes sense that those things happen, knowing what I know now and knowing working in the field that I do, and knowing the laws, because my current job is about knowing the laws and teaching people those laws. And so I think that, it's hard, because I think for providers, they want to keep people safe. And when someone
They have to, right? They have to keep people safe because they're facing a lawsuit.
right, right. Right. And I have, in my current role, I can't say where I work because I didn't get approval for that. But in my current role, I have heard situations of, when people are not managed or supported in the ways that they need, harm that happens between people and within the psych wards. And so it makes sense why people want to, like, why the staff want to keep people safe. For me, in my deepest psychosis, like, I am not a violent person. I have never been a violent person. I think the most that violence that I've perpetuated while in a psychotic state is like throwing a pillow at a provider. And that resulted in me being strapped down, And so like, I know, like, when I am in, like, just completely out of this world, like, I still, want everyone to love everyone, and I want us to all get along. And like, that's just how I show up. And so, granted, I can be, mean just like everyone else, especially if I'm hungry.
Oh yeah, I get mean. I I know that you can understand this through the storytelling of other people and your own experience, but like, Talon and I were talking the other day about why finally getting on lithium was so hard for me, and we kind of went down a rabbit hole, but I think for the first time he really understood this thing that I don't talk about to people, because, you never want to traumatize other people, but like, working in the field and the number of state run and privately funded institutions I've been in, and the things that I have seen and the stories that I have heard, I would never tell people. And I will say the only like word I can use to explain is like brutal, like completely brutal, and like living with those stories and having to have been there both as a patient and a staff member. I can't express the impact that it's had on my life to have been in so many situations where I observe people who don't have autonomy over their bodies and over their lives. And it's really hard. It's like the ultimate ethical dilemma in my career and my life is health and safety versus, autonomy and self-determination and all of those things. So anyways, we could go down a whole rabbit thing of that.
Yeah. Can I just say one thing on that piece? Because I think I also have a unique perspective as someone that worked as a memory care caregiver in a locked ward for a year and a half. I worked in an assisted living facility, but that I was primarily in the memory care ward because I was so good at connecting with people that, weren't really grounded in reality, because I could relate. And so, and in those facilities, I did witness so much, neglect is probably the biggest piece. And a lot of that neglect came from the fact that providers didn't know how to support folks that were struggling with mental health challenges, because often people that end up in those memory care wards are people that have mental health challenges that were never diagnosed at a younger age. And then as you get older, they become, for some people, they can become less, but for others, they can become more intense, those symptoms. And so, often, like, there were certain people that would only work with me because I was able to essentially meet them where they were. That's the foundational element of peer support, is meeting people where they're at. And so, even before I got into the peer field, I was still like, I kind of saw it as a peer support a little bit, because I may not, have Alzheimer's or dementia, but I know what psychosis feels like. I know what it feels like to lose touch with reality and to be terrified about what's going on because of that. And so, yeah, just wanted to touch on that as well.
Yeah. It's just in your blood. So we were kind of talking about this, and I wasn't expecting to ask you this, but this was before the recording. But there is this like a kind of unique dynamic between people who have bipolar and people who have borderline and the ways in which we can relate and then the ways in which we absolutely cannot relate. And a lot of people with borderline specifically have been really angry. I don't want to speak for everyone, but a lot of people have been angry at the ways in which they were misdiagnosed with bipolar before they got their appropriate diagnosis of borderline, right? Because most people with borderline have at least gone through the process of, oh, maybe you have bipolar before they get to borderline. Borderline is way more common than bipolar disorder, right? Bipolar is a brain disorder. Borderline is environmental trauma and relationships and all of these things that develop these symptoms. The mood, the kind of like mood liability, the ups and downs and things like that can look similar, but I mean, it's rapid for us and it's not for you. So I'm wondering, like, what do you think the difference between bipolar and borderline is? And how have you seen maybe people with, peer support needs be frustrated by those misdiagnoses or feel confused?
Right. Well, to your second point, I don't know that I have really experienced that from as a peer supporter, as a provider, um, because the population that I primarily have served are up to age 24, and typically people don't get a borderline diagnosis before the age of 24, from my understanding. And correct me if I'm wrong on that, but typically, therapists and providers are not willing to like, because there's the stigma, right? There's a stigma of like the heavy, like the label. And from my understanding of it, it's basic, like there are a lot of similarities, but I think some of the biggest differences is with bipolar, my depressions and my manias can last for weeks or months, or with depressions, it can last for years. Whereas my understanding of borderline is very more of the rapid cycling, more of the shifting mood, like kind of from hour to hour or moment to moment. Whereas for me, like I can definitely rapid cycle. That is absolutely an experience that I have, but it is more common for my states to last for a while. And it's been also my experience that people with bipolar tend to have a more like responsive reaction to medication, especially certain types of medications versus others, because it is very much like a chemical, imbalance in the brain where like my neurobiology, is like the way that I describe bipolar to people that don't have these types of experiences is like everyone lives with a certain range of emotion. And with bipolar, it's just like wider. Like that range is just like we experience wider and deeper emotions. And I think that's true for people with borderline as well. But I think that the difference is the length of time and the neurochemistry and the biology of the experience. Because honestly, like I didn't really experience a lot of trauma growing up. Like I had a really solid childhood. My parents are very anxious people, like my dad, but they like they're doing their best and they showed up in the best ways possible. I never had to I never had to worry about food on the table. I never had to worry about bills being paid. There were some times when I couldn't go on school trips because we didn't have enough money, but typically like they made it work, and I was involved in sports and I was involved in clubs, and so I was very well supported growing up, and I still struggled with my moods. But my understanding of people with borderline is that there's typically more trauma, in childhood. And so, my psychosis, my first like experience of psychosis and what led me to be diagnosed was my grandma dying and my dad having open heart surgery, and my relationship of 3.5 years ending. But all of those things, those are traumatic, but they're not like trauma in the sense of like abuse or neglect or abandonment or those pieces. And I think that also from what I understand of borderline is that abandonment is a really big piece of that. And I haven't experienced a lot of loss besides my grandma. I'm honestly pretty isolated. I don't have a lot of friends. Talon is one of my only friends, but when it comes to like actual like loss abandonment pieces, like I haven't experienced a lot of that. So I think those are some of the differences that come to mind for me. And
Yeah, interesting. I don't know a life without that, without loss.
And the other thing that I was going to mention too is, so when I was 19, I went through DBT. I went through dialectical behavioral therapy in like a specific like DBT program in Lake Oswego in Oregon. And I drove like 45 minutes twice a week to get to this treatment program. And that was the first time going through that program was the first time in my life I had been able, since the age of 13, to stop self-harming for any significant amount of time. So the treatments for, and DBT is primarily for borderline, but it worked for me as someone with bipolar. I think there are a lot of intersections, and it does messy.
Yeah, it does get messy. There's actually some theories. Hopefully I don't make anyone listening mad, but I probably make them mad all the time just by my theoretical talk. But there are some theories by psychiatrists that bipolar and borderline really should be kind of on a spectrum disorder, like autism spectrum disorder, right? Like that these really are not so significantly different that we should kind of consider them on a spectrum. I don't know what the DSM-6 is going to have for us. I don't know that that's, I have thoughts about it either way, but it is an interesting theory. And then like DBT really is for everyone, right? Emotion regulation skills are for everyone. And I hate that we talk about this and we make this program so inaccessible because we say that you should have a specific criteria, or that this is a really expensive program to administer to people. It just really fucking pisses me off. And like, as a clinician, I refer people to Portland DBT and to DBT places just for having like major depressive disorder or like social anxiety that's so significant that they can't function. It's like, nope, we got to go get some like intensive support, and you need to learn some skills. But yeah, DBT is so hard to access. It just fucking pisses me off. So you have some big stuff coming up in life. Do you want to talk about this big thing that's happening for you?
Yeah, let's hope it's still happening tomorrow. We shall see. So I'm scheduled to get top surgery tomorrow. There is a chance that we will have to push it out, hopefully only a week. Hopefully that's all. But I didn't realize that I was supposed to have stopped my turmeric supplements, which is something I take for carpal tunnel, but it is a blood thinner. And so for anyone that's getting surgery, for future, like if you are taking anything that can be a blood thinner, stop it 2 weeks prior to surgery, because that could have negative effects. So I am waiting on a call back. They were closed all last week. So as soon as I realized, I called, but they were closed, for the holidays. And so, I will be calling on Monday, tomorrow to confirm. And then the other piece, there's another, because also my partner is my primary caregiver post-op, but he is very sick right now. So if he's still feeling as sick as he is today, tomorrow, then we might have to push it out to Friday if they have that opening, or Monday next week. It depends on the surgeon that I'm going with is a private surgeon that runs their own private practice. And so they have more time. And because also I'm using private insurance, if I was using Medicaid or state health, it would be months if I had to reschedule. But because I have private insurance, and I've already paid, my portion of it, it's like $1,500. And I have like excellent insurance. And even with excellent insurance, it was still like $1,500 that we had to like save for months. I've been working on getting the surgery for over 2 years now. And then like initially, so it's like laughable to me that some people think that like gender affirming care, you can just like go to a school and come back a different gender and like have had a surgery. Like that's like my surgery got denied the first time I submitted it to the insurance for approval. And when you submit to get top surgery from insurance, you have to have 2 letters. You have to have a letter from your primary care doctor. You have to have a letter from a therapist saying that you experience gender dysphoria. My therapist at the time did not specifically include the diagnostic criteria for gender dysphoria, like F6 point, whatever it is. Like they did not include that. And so it was denied. And so then I had to appeal and wait 5 more weeks and submit a new letter with the correct diagnostic criteria. And then it did get approved, but I only got approval for one side of my chest. They didn't specifically state bilateral mastectomy. And so I had to then appeal again and be like, hey, I need approval to remove all of my chest, not just half of my chest. And finally, like 6 or 7 weeks after I initially requested the surgery, they approved it. So then it got scheduled for tomorrow, and I might get postponed. And my like, I have to get this surgery before inauguration day. Like that's just what has to happen. And so because there have been claims that this won't be possible past that, so I really need to get the surgery before inauguration day, and it will happen in the next like month because I've taken the next month off work, and I need to be able to get this done. So but I'm like at this point kind of like preparing, like hoping for the best, preparing for the worst when it comes to like surgery tomorrow, because I'm kind of expecting them to tell me, no, you need to postpone. That way I'm not like, expecting it to happen tomorrow and then being super disappointed. So yeah, that's the big thing that's going on right now.
Yeah, that's huge. Such a good example of how systems do not serve. Also, like I'm not understanding, like, didn't they go over all the medications with you and all the supplements with you and say stop taking the turmeric? Like, I don't understand how they missed that.
So that was my bad because I forgot to list turmeric on.
Oh, okay.
It's just a step. I was like, oh, it's just a supplement. It's just like,
Yeah. Who knew it thinned your blood?
yeah, exactly.
I thought it just like boosted your immune system.
Right. No, it does a lot. It's actually a really like intense herb. I just yeah, when I saw that initially, I was like alone at the house, and I had a little bit of a panic attack because I was like, oh shit, like I'll just not tell them. I'll just not say anything, and then I'll just continue and it'll be fine. But then I was like, no, I need to like I need to talk to my partner about this at least. And he was like, yeah, you need to talk to the doctor. And I was like, okay, fine. I'll do the responsible thing because I don't want to like bleed out on the table.
I would not have done the responsible thing. I would have just been like, yeah, we'll roll those dice, baby. So how do you see finally having top surgery impacting your peer support work? Because that's huge, right? Like, you have so many people that are going to be working towards a gender affirming care, or, have already started that process. How do you think that will change your experience?
Well, it will give me a lot of experience of how to support others through accessing like medical transition. So I came out as queer at age 21, and then I came out as non-binary at age 25. And then when my partner and I got married, I saw myself in a wedding dress, and I was like, that's wrong. That's not what I'm going to look like. Um, and the next month I changed my name and my pronouns to he and they. And then 6 months later, I started testosterone. And so now I am really leaning more into the identity of a trans man and less non-binary, because I feel like there is unfortunately, there's a lot of push in the trans community, the non-binary, specifically the non-binary, like AFAB, which is assigned female at birth. So anyone who is assigned female at birth, there's this push that masculinity and men are bad and wrong and evil. And if you identify that way, or if you lean towards masculinity, then you are also bad and evil. And that is a lot of the push by TERFs, which are trans exclusionary radical feminists like J.K. Rowling, who don't think that trans women are women, or trans men are men, or like that don't feel like there's a big push in society to like basically make trans people like go in the shadows and not exist anymore. This has been something that's been going on for years. The Family Research Council, I think in 2000, somewhere in the early 2000s, they put out a list of a 5-point plan to eradicate trans people from society. And our current president-elect is like following the plan to a T. And so there is a big push right now to like get all your documents in order, make sure that, like, right now I have an appointment with Social Security in a couple of weeks to make sure that my gender marker says male. Because right now my driver's license says male, but my Social Security marker says female. And that could get me into trouble with the new administration. So for any trans people listening, it's good to get your documents in order. And unfortunately, you kind of have to choose a binary, because Trump is wanting to push that like there will only be male and female and nothing else. And even though there are some documents like passports you can put an X on, that is really like there's a push right now for folks in the non-binary community to unfortunately kind of assess, how do I quote unquote pass what do people see me as? And that's the gender that I need to have on my documents. Um, just for safety reasons solely. Like it's so shitty because it like dysphoria is real. And like it's painful and it's hard to describe for people that don't experience gender dysphoria. But this is like in order to stay alive, in order to stay safe, like we really have to make things align. And so I think like what I will take from this surgery is like it is a privilege, first of all, to be able to access this. And I know like I am still early in my transition. I've only been on testosterone for 3 years now this month. And so I still like am perceived as a woman. So I'm a little bit nervous, honestly, about like what is like the public restroom situation after top surgery. Because right now, the way that it is I typically use women's bathroom because that's what I'm perceived as. Even though it gives me dysphoria, even though I don't like it, I go because I need to use the bathroom and I need to be safe. And I am connected with trans people that have been assaulted at public rest areas for using the bathrooms that align with their gender. So, this is not just like some sort of like extreme thinking. Like these things really happen and they are going to increase in number as time goes on. And so, and I don't want to be fear mongering also because I think that it's so like, I love trans people. The best people in my life are trans. Like we are such a powerful, beautiful, magnificent, like group of people that have so much to offer the world. And it's so important that we live loud and proud and safe. And so making those, kind of figuring out like, am I safe to be myself or do I need to like, how do I need to address that? So I did do a orientation to become a mentor. There's a program called the Trans Empowerment Project that works with trans people across the country right now they have like micro grants to help people flee the states that they're living in to go to other states like Washington. Washington is a really safe state. It's, the fact that I live here as a trans person is also a privilege. And so, but I'm going to be working with them once I'm healed from surgery to become a peer support, like a mentor. Basically, they call it a mentor, but it's basically peer support. And so, I think it's like over Zoom is how that works. And so I will be, working with other trans people to support them in the ways that I can. I think that this primarily is related to like trans specific stuff, but if they have other things that they want to talk about, like, we're all humans, and just because like one part of our identity is not everything of all we are. So I will be doing that and trying to like, uplift my community. So I was the straight ally president of the Gay Straight Alliance at my college for 4 years. And then it was the caregiver where I had to kind of pretend and hide. I had to pretend to be a woman because, I was working with 80, 90, 100-year-old women that I was caring for, in very vulnerable states where I'm like helping them take showers. And if I were presenting as a man, I don't know that they would feel comfortable with that. So I had to just kind of pretend in order to stay safe and keep them feeling safe. Um, but I lost my train of thought. Yeah. But yeah, ask me another question because I lost it. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I love it. I'm so excited for you. You'll have to let us know if it's tomorrow or if it's Friday or whatever. But I think, this is a discussion I'm having with some of my clients is like, they're in that preparation phase too, leading up to the inauguration. And it's like, okay, well, my job as a therapist then is to help you figure out how to follow through this with those steps in a way that makes you feel like you're moving forward and causes you the least amount of anxiety possible. And so right now, a lot of my therapy is like solution focused in that way. But yeah, thank you for sharing that part of your story. I know it's a big part. We are at our time. I have to go get my psych meds before they go on lunch. Um, I do plan to have a Patreon bonus with Andy, so you guys can look out for that. Head over to Patreon to listen to that. But Andy, what is this one thing as we close out that you want people to know about peer support?
Yeah. So peer support saved my life. The one of the pieces that I haven't touched on is there was a program that I got into, and don't know, I don't know if I'm allowed to say the name of it. It's okay. It's an online program called Bipolar in Order, that is run by a man who also lives with bipolar, that was actually a Buddhist monk for like 8 years and before developing this program. And a lot of it is around mindfulness, but it's also just about like learning how to recognize your cycles, because bipolar is a cyclical condition. It's never going to go away. It's about learning how to recognize those cycles so that you can manage them and continue to live. Through this program, I also attended like support groups from people all over the world. And that was the first time. I think I started this program when I was 27. That was the first time in my entire life that I had talked with another human that lived with bipolar that was doing like successful things. Prior to that, the only like role model that I knew of was Robin Williams. And he took his own life. And so I didn't have any peers. I didn't have any role models of what it could look like to live a happy, healthy life with bipolar. And so when I got into this program and saw this man that was creating this program, that was a published author, that had done all this work and was still living with the severe, symptoms of bipolar, like gave me hope. That's like having that little bit of peer support. That's what really like led me on the trajectory that I'm on right now, is just being able to be with other people that have that lived experience, just like you're doing and living as, some out loud as someone with borderline. Like you're letting other people know, like it's possible. Like it's okay. And so, that's like peer support is life-changing and makes such a huge difference. And it can be so healing for not only the people that we're serving, but also for ourselves. I know I healed so much of my younger self when I was working as a youth peer. And so, I encourage everyone, especially if you're in Washington State, it's a pretty good process to become a peer supporter. The laws are changing as of July, but it's the training will be 80 hours to become certified. But you can also learn, become your own private practitioner with the new regulations as a peer support specialist. So it is a growing field, a growing profession, and makes such a positive impact and is life-changing. So thank you for letting me kind of spread the word about peer support.
I love it. At one point, Talon was kind of looking into that when we first moved here. And I was like, you'd be really good at it. Also, I know he'd be so good at it. The money piece, right? It's like the systems don't yet see the importance of it. So they're not paying like a living wage, for example. But I'm hoping that, the work that you're doing and the work that other people are doing around educating and research and peer support, that will change. Well, Andy, thank you so much for your time. I'm so excited to talk more with you. And everybody listening, I hope you have a great rest of the day and start of 2025.
Thank you so much.